Hello, and welcome back to Neotopia, the podcast. I am your host, Jillian Mason Shannon, and today we're going into part 2 of our little mini-series, Human Consciousness Evolving in the Bible. Consider the Bible like a movie with 3 acts. The Adam and Eve story could be like our prologue. And then we have Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3, each with a main hero or protagonist ushering in the story into the next stage of human consciousness. The protagonist of Act 1 is Abraham. Act 2 is Moses. And Act 3 is Jesus. Remember, in movies, each act builds on the one before rather than abolishes. Each act is necessary for the next act, for the story to unfold. Baruch Spinoza, the Jewish philosopher, points out the various ways in which each of these 3 main players relate to God. Abraham hears God's voice, he hears commands, and he responds with obedience. Command, obey. Therefore, Abraham and God have an ear-to-ear relationship. Moses, Act 2, sees God in the burning bush. He sees with his eyes something that inspires a new vision for righteousness. Thus, Moses becomes a visionary. Moses and God have a face-to-face relationship. Jesus, Act 3, never actually dialogues with God. God doesn't tell him what to do, with Jesus obeying like that happened with Abraham. Jesus also doesn't have face-to-face conversations with God. Rather, Jesus was mind to mind with God, able to fully conform to the will of God and use his internal strength of discernment to understand what needed to be done. Today, we'll discuss Act 1 of our movie, the relationship between Abraham and God. Their entire relationship is based on this covenantal promise. You do as I say, and I will grant you what you really want. Children and land. Not only the land, God will make Abraham the father of, yes, his own offspring and of an entire nation. That is the promise. Now think of their relationship, Abraham and God, as the toddler or child stage of human evolution, of human consciousness. God tells Abraham what to do, and Abraham obeys, like we do with children. Do as I say, and I will give you a cookie. And Abraham does very well. Pack up and leave your homeland. Done. Change your name from Abram to Abraham. Done. Circumcise yourself. Done. Circumcise everyone in your household. Done. Count the stars. Move through the land of Canaan. Pray for Abimelech. Done. Bring me a heifer, a goat, a ram, a dove, a pigeon, all 3 years old, cut in half. Done. Send away your slave Hagar and your son with her, Ishmael. Done. Do what is righteous and just. Done? Every single thing he's told to do, he does without thinking, with unthinking, unblinking, reflexive obedience. Now, the final interaction between God and Abraham is a famous story, one in which God tells Abraham to sacrifice, as in murder, his son, Isaac, the son that he and his wife Sarah prayed so hard for, the son they were granted in exchange for being obedient. Abraham automatically obeys, as he does. He takes Isaac with him to the top of a mountain, lies to him when his son asks him what this is all about, builds an altar, ties his son on the altar, takes a knife, lifts it in the air to slay him. And in that moment, an angel of the Lord calls out to him to stop. Do not kill your son. Centuries of writing and preaching and philosophizing on this disturbing story have resulted in praise of Abraham for his courageous obedience and faith. Wow, he loves God so much that he's willing to kill his son. What an example. Now, this is a troubling story, and that's an even more troubling interpretation. Old Testament scholar and professor at Perkins School of Theology, Dr. Roy Heller, has a unique and important interpretation on this story, which I'll share now. The text begins with this line: "After these things, God tested Abraham." We as the reader know two things about this story that Abraham doesn't know. One, this is a test. And two, we also know the end of the story, the fact that God doesn't want the child to die. I don't know who needs to hear this. God does not want children to die. Now, we assume the test we're about to see is a test in obedience. But you heard the long list of ways in which Abraham has been obedient this entire time, done nothing but prove his obedience. Why would he need a test now in obedience? Let's go back to that first line. After these things, God tested Abraham. After what things? This is a climactic moment in which everything prior, everything in Abraham's relationship to God, everything in Abraham's life, everything from the beginning of Genesis comes to a climax. And when we're tested, our priorities are made crystal clear. Abraham prioritizes obedience, but rarely does he act in righteousness, kindness, mercy, love, and justice for those who are less fortunate or those who are vulnerable. He almost never does, except once. Just a few chapters prior to this moment, God states that the reason he chose Abraham was so that Abraham could learn the ways of God, which is justice, mercy, and righteousness. And then he gives him a pop quiz. Hey, Abraham, I'm going to destroy this city of Sodom. I'm going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. What do you think? And Abraham negotiates with God on behalf of the people of Sodom and Gomorrah, says, no, we can't destroy that city, not if even one innocent person has to die. That's wrong. Shouldn't you, the judge of all the earth, do what is just, he says? So Abraham seems to get it. He seems to understand his role to usher in a level of righteousness for the vulnerable and the innocent. After these things, God tested Abraham. So now we're back to our story. God calls to him, Abraham, here I am, Lord. Take your son Isaac, go to Moriah and sacrifice him there as a burnt offering. Now, many great thinkers like Soren Kierkegaard argue that Abraham was a wreck hearing this. Oh my goodness, I want to obey God, but how could I do this? It's my only son. Well, that's not in the Bible. The Bible says there was the command from God, and the very next line is, early the next morning, Abraham rises to get the job done. He's back on his default response, immediate and reflexive. No negotiating, no pleading. We know how the story ends. God again calls out, tells Abraham to stop. Don't kill him. Don't even lay a hand on him. Abraham didn't pass the test. He failed because it was a test in righteousness. Abraham goes on to live a long life after this, but without any real relationship with his son or with God, because God never speaks to Abraham again. A scene from HBO's Succession. If you haven't seen the show but plan to, you may want to skip ahead.
Hey, son. I can't do any more of that shit from this morning.
No. No, sure. I bet.
Greg. Tom. Doesn't work. Won't add up.
Right. No, I see that.
And they won't accept me.
Mm-hmm. I get it. I do.
You know, Marcia and I used to read to each other. I'd read her history. You know, Spangler, Gibbon, the big boys.
Okay.
The Incas, in times of terrible crisis, would sacrifice a child to the sun. I said to her they were a bunch of fucking savages.
Mm-hmm.
Her thing was, what could you possibly kill that you love so much it would make the sun rise again? She said that.
Okay.
I miss her.
It's okay, Dad. It's okay.
Thank you. Thank you, son. So, we'll set up a press conference, and you'll admit that you knew everything and that you directed the cover-up, and it went no higher.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay?
This is fiction, but scapegoating, sacrificing, and is alive and well. In fact, it's an embedded feature in our psyches, in religions, in cultures, business, the art of war. Oftentimes it's more subtle. We scapegoat others without even realizing we're doing it. But what really gets sacrificed in our sacrifice of others? Our relationships. It's worth asking ourselves, what quality in our relationship with God determines the rest? Is it obedience or righteousness? If it's obedience, we might do whatever the Bible says, even without responsible, contextual, careful reading. Oh, the Bible says it right here, or my church says it, so it must be true. Period, end of story, and I'm just gonna obey it. I'll follow those rules with unthinking, reflexive obedience. We must ask ourselves, if obedience is the hinge, who are those around you that suffer due to your obedience? At face value, the Bible affirms slavery, so therefore, I will fight for the right to have slaves. That's historical. The Bible, at face value, has anti-LGBTQ rhetoric, so no, I do not accept those in the LGBTQ community, even if they're in my family, as fully dignified humans with the same rights as I. Or are we capable of the next stage of consciousness, of adopting a vision of justice and righteousness? This story ends with God providing a provision, which is a ram, an alternative sacrifice for Abraham, so he does not have to use his own son. Notice the word provision. Provision. And in the next act, Act 2 of our biblical movie, the protagonist is Moses, and he sees God. They interact face to face. And we end here with a provision and move on to a face-to-face relationship with God, one that is about adopting a vision for righteousness. With Moses, we get the 10 Commandments, sort of ground rules of righteousness, one of which is, of course, do not kill.